In the roaring 20s, people could buy a movie ticket at this very box office at the Rialto Theatre in Montreal and escape from daily life with silent movies, accompanied by an orchestra.
It was a cinema palace, as they used to call them back in the day, that could seat over 1,300 people. There was an orchestra pit here that accompanied the old original black and white films.
The Rialto opened in 1924. It features an exterior design modeled after an 1860s facade, familiar to 1920s moviegoers who saw the Universal Pictures film The Phantom of the Opera. Montreal architect Joseph Raoul Gariepi based the Rialto on the famous landmark in Paris.
It was inspired by the Paris Opera House. We're very fortunate to have this building here in Montreal. It's recognized as a historical landmark by the federal and provincial governments of Canada.
The Rialto showed movies and had occasional live shows from the 1920s until the late 1980s. But similar to the theater in the Phantom story, the Rialto has a dark period in its history too. The historic palace literally went dark.
I remember coming as a teenager, coming to see films here, and we used to just love being in the building. So when it closed in 1990, it was a tremendous loss for Montreal's cultural sector.
After attorneys Ezio Carosielli and Luisa Sassano purchased the building in 2010, the live shows and movies returned to the Rialto, along with a major restoration project to bring the much-altered venue back to its movie palace glory. English Communications and Programming Director Patrick Charron calls the interior restoration nearly complete. It showcases the work of a Montreal man responsible for the lush look of many a palace.
The interior design was done by Emmanuel Briffa, who was a native of Malta who moved to Montreal. In fact, lived in this area of town. And Emmanuel Briffa himself is responsible for about 200 cinema houses across North America from the early 20th century. He became famous for his work there. 60 of them were done here in Canada. And the Rialto is a shining example of the kind of work and detail he put into designing the interiors of these wonderful cinema palaces. The large dome that's on the high ceiling is part of the original design by Emmanuel Briffa. And as you can see, it's a spectacular Tiffany glass. And it is indicative of Briffa's neo-Baroque inspiration for the space. It's definitely the feature attraction of the space.
Now you may once again enjoy your show in comfortable red seats, watched over by angels in the balcony.
The angel frescoes are a particularly a special part of the design. They are original, they have been untouched throughout the decades, and they were designed and hand-painted by Emmanuel Briffa himself.
Another important element that remains, the asbestos curtain, made safe to eliminate any health concerns, and actually a safety feature of the auditorium.
Most theaters back in the early 20th century had asbestos curtains because of the highly sort of flammable nature of these structures. A lot of these buildings were built with wood as a principal material, and with film stock being made of highly flammable materials and film projectors being so hot, there were some unfortunate incidences where these cinema houses caught on fire. And of course, when you have over 1,000 people in a building, this becomes an issue. So it became quite standard to have the asbestos curtain to separate the backstage from the audience, and this give a sense of security to audiences. And we're lucky to still have ours, yeah.
The artistic community of Montreal is lucky too, according to Charron. He's helped schedule a series of upcoming films and nostalgic live events, including appearances by Judy Collins, the Crystals and the Shirelles, and Chubby Checker. Evenings often include dinner and a show. The more than $3 million restoration is not complete at the Rialto. The lower dome needs its Tiffany glass restored. And a brand new theater space will house plays and events, all part of the vision of Luisa Sassano and Ezio Carosielli.
He's a gentleman with a love of old films and vintage architecture, and so he decided to take it on, and all Montrealers are very lucky that he did so, because his intentions are to preserve the space as a historical site and to bring it back to its former glory, not only in its spirit in terms of a performing arts space, but in terms of preserving the patrimonial character of the design.
Just like the Paris Opera House, the Rialto has its own restaurant, Il Rialto. And also like the Paris Opera House, they say the Rialto has its own ghost. But let's say for now that anyone's spirit will be uplifted when experiencing the opulence of the Rialto Theatre. Spotlight segments are supported in part by the Glenn and Carol Pearsall Adirondack Foundation, dedicated to improving the quality of life for year-round residents of the Adirondack Park.